remember that when we had those bombs, it was during apartheid. And when the apartheid government established those bombs, it was not because they wanted to bomb anyone. It was because I think they wanted to at least have a seat on the table, global table of negotiations. Because even though the research reactor was built by Americans, but Americans were not strong allies of South Africa. So maybe that the government then thought that in order to restart the plans soon. But that then, as South Africans, let's come and say and put pressure on our government to implement these things, because there will be a time where electricity becomes more costly, and nuclear will give us the cheapest electricity. It's currently doing them talking about it, because I feel like when they talk about it, especially they spoke a lot about implementing nuclear before elections. Was that an election campaign?
Yeah, because
they're looking for votes, because right now it's quiet, and we saw that Minister Ramaphosa withdrew the gazette for section compromises our economy. But then that's not what's happening. So these countries who are not stopping to use their coal, they're coming to us and say, move away from coal, and we say, okay, it's
people who are afraid of the comrades. If you given our history with how we failed with the coal-fired power stations.
Sorry,
yes.
To cut you off. And another thing, to say that Zuma wanted Russians to build, that is also not correct. What happened is that South Africa signed, memorandum of cooperations. They call them that, with U.S., Russia, South Korea, and France.
Okay.
It was France, and I think in US it was 5 countries. So they signed the memorandum of cooperation with those countries. And then the decision to build had not been taken yet, because in order for you to take that decision, you have to do
Machine Political Incorrect, you have demanded and you have wanted expert to come on the show. We are lucky today. We are going to have those ones that comes with butane brains, that deadly combination that we hardly ever get in South Africa. Here it is. So I'm going to be requesting you to write all your questions, because she might be coming again, or she might be able to answer your questions on the comments line. I'm not going to spend more time. She comes from a rich background of energy, but she will tell us who she is and where she's from. Princess.
Hello.
Tell us, who are you and where are you from?
My name is Princess Mtomeni. Many people call me Princy.
Okay.
I am from KZN originally, but I reside in Gauteng. I am a nuclear communicator. I'm also a founder of Africa for Nuclear, which is an advocacy campaign that promotes nuclear as a contributor to achieving Africa's agenda for sustainable development. I work in one of organizations in the nuclear industry.
Okay, and you do what work there? You communicate. You are an ambassador of nuclear, because that's what you do, or on the outside. Inside that organization, what do you do there?
I do communication in the organization, in the communications department.
Okay.
But outside, really, which is what
we are here for.
Why I'm here,
yes,
is that I advocate for nuclear on the African continent.
The other day I was thinking, what is nuclear? Kasotho, and I battled. And do you have any idea what Nesisulu you would?
Yeah, I know about Nusi.
What?
Nusi.
Nusi.
Yes.
And who coined it?
I don't know. I don't have a Zulu.
Okay, it's fine. So I want us to talk about the challenges of energy in South Africa, and the various forms. I mean, people are talking about hydrogen, and they even call it green hydrogen. I'm a proponent of good alternatives of energy, but if something is not realistic, I honestly do not understand why we should even entertain it. The PPPs, and stuff. So I want us to give us, because you are in the energy space, give us maybe a historical perspective just to bring us here so we can understand South Africa's links with nuclear, so we could then discuss going further, just so we understand ourselves in the space and how big are we as South Africa in the whole world. We compare ourselves.
All right, I have to start by saying South Africa is a coal country. Our economy as it is, it's really because of coal, among other things. And we have a lot of coal in South Africa, coal mines, and we have abundance of it. And we're still going to have coal for the next coming 100 years. We're still going to use coal. And then when it comes to nuclear, we have uranium, because nuclear comes from uranium. If you talk about the nuclear value chain, it starts from mining uranium. What is uranium? Uranium, it is a heavy metal that has always been used as an abundant source of concentrated energy. But let's just say in simple terms, it's one of our minerals. We mine uranium. In South Africa, uranium is mainly from a byproduct, byproduct of gold and copper mining. And we have around, I think, 8 known uranium deposits in various provinces here in South Africa. So that's just it. But also, we have a nuclear power plant, the only nuclear power plant on the continent. We call it Koeberg. It's based in Cape Town. Koeberg supplies South Africa with 5% of our total electricity. So that's basically our history. But also, South Africa is not only involved with nuclear for electricity production only. We also use nuclear for medicine, and we have been using nuclear application, medical application for many years. We have a research reactor in Pelindaba called Safari 1, which was built in the 60s. It started operating in 1965, and that research reactor was built by Americans. And that research reactor is used for medical isotopes. And South Africa, through that research reactor, is one of the top 4 countries that produce and export nuclear medicine globally. So that's just our history. But our history also includes us having nuclear weapons.
Okay. So I'm tempted to ask you, because you spoke about mining, I'm tempted to ask you, Zama and stuff, and because you wanted me to know that the one that you know of in this mining space. So let me talk about the political history that I understand. Maybe if you know something, you would correct me. So as South Africans, we have always had this capacity of enriching uranium and stuff, and our expertise in Pelindaba, of course, culminated in us having these nuclear bombs. And at some point, I think around 79, we have gathered enough strength, and people who support South Africa will tell you that it was because South Africa had no friends. But I'm not sure about that. It's because South Africa had no friends. People were afraid to associate with South Africa. South Africa did not have any allies, so it had to protect itself with nuclear. Around 1979, the bombs were ready. The reason I'm saying bombs, I'm not even sure how many they were, but the one that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were as powerful as those that South Africa had. So we lost that capacity because we did not trust each other with the people that we negotiated this country with. And I don't know if it was general agreement between the two parties who were negotiating, but we relinquished our expertise there and our bombs. I don't know how. I don't know the history. I've once went to Pelindaba, by the way, in that information center. I forgot what it's called. tons and tons of knowledge. Sometimes I feel like I could just take people there to actually understand there are things about South Africa that you don't know. There are things about South Africa because we are always thought of as downward and stuff. And I must emphasize that there's a lot of American involvement with that history and even in current, but it's not spoken about frequently. But to cut the long story short of the history is, I find myself, because I'm a historical and political observer, because we relinquished those capabilities of creating bombs. We also ignored, that's why we only have Quebec as a nuclear power plant, and we could not have others because I believe we would have. And you go to that center, they will tell you, how to the waste, how to dispose of the waste, how you cover it, how this thing is done, and how other countries, and like I say, I look at this, Chernobyl is one of the biggest poster boy for anything that could go bad with nuclear, but I've not seen any other stories bigger than that Chernobyl in Ukraine. So I sit here and I think, as South Africa, we dropped the ball. Please explain to me if I'm wrong. I think we've dropped the ball, because now when we speak about nuclear as South Africans, we always link Russia. Couldn't we, if we had played our balls right, our cards right, couldn't we be having a situation where we can control our nuclear energy the same way we have with coal?
I think you're right in terms of dropping the ball.
The ball. Sorry.
No, I'm talking bomb. No pun intended. You're correct. But not because we relinquished our nuclear weapons program. That has nothing to do with us, further developing our energy capability in terms of nuclear. Because if you just remember that when we had those bombs, it was during apartheid. And when the apartheid government established those bombs, it was not because they wanted to bomb anyone. It was because I think they wanted to at least have a seat on the table, global table of negotiations. Because even though the research reactor was built by Americans, but Americans were not strong allies of South Africa. So maybe that the government then thought that in order to get the attention of the globe, including the Americans, they must have this, technology, which is nuclear weapons. There were 6, by the way. South Africa had 6 nuclear weapons. So, and they secretly built them. And later on, when they realized that they are being sanctioned, by the way, they were asked in the 70s to sign a treaty, a non-proliferation treaty, to say we are going to stop using nuclear technology for weapons programs, but only for peaceful purposes. And they did not sign the treaty. And then that's why now the sanctions further, strengthened, to say the globe, even the United Nations took a resolution that we are going to sanction South Africa, and encouraged their member states to do the same, to sanction South Africa. And they realized, the apartheid government, that now the sanctions are becoming costly for them, and they are, the Olympians are now no longer allowed to go compete. So they were further isolated from the global activities, including the sports activities. And in 1969, when they took a decision to dismantle, to first shut down the uranium enrichment plant, and now to also dismantle the nuclear weapons programs. And then later on, in 1993, de Klerk announced that South Africa secretly built nuclear weapons program and secretly dismantled those weapons programs. But the timing suggests that really the apartheid government did not want to hand over power to the democratic government with this nuclear weapons program. Yeah, so that's our history. But that history does not mean that South Africa does not have the capabilities of building more nuclear power plants, such as Quebec. Because, the uranium that you use in nuclear plants, it's called low enriched uranium. For bombs, you need the high enriched uranium. So we do have the skills. Many people in South Africa have worked in the plant that you visited, and they've also worked at Gobert in Cape. They also work there, and many are also based in the diaspora as we speak right now. So we do have skills, we do have capabilities, because we do have uranium in South Africa. Even though we are not involved in the value chain, in the whole processing steps of uranium. We only do mining and probably milling, where we turn it into a yellow cake. From there it has to go to overseas for fabrication and other steps. And then Gobert receives it as when it's packaged into what we call the uranium pellet in a fuel element, so that they take those fuel elements and put them inside the research reactor and generate electricity. But yeah, we do have skills, and if we were to build more nuclear power plants, those skills, even those that are based in the diaspora, they would come back to South Africa.
So in short, you are saying there's no political will to advance our...
Yes, I would say that there is a political will. The problem is implementation. Because politicians can sit on the table and decide that yes, we want nuclear, but if they are not implementing it, then... And also, I think because now we are talking about a politically contested terrain, which is energy as a whole, nuclear is even worse, then the problem becomes now with how then these policies are I think are toughened up in order for these anti-development or these people who are pushing anti-development agenda are not able to exploit the loopholes in those policies. So that's the problem that we have, that whoever is trying to implement nuclear, then somewhere, somehow, the anti-nuclear lobbyists, they find loopholes that they exploit. And then we end up not having implemented the policy the way we were supposed to be. If you remember in 2010, we had the policy, the Integrated Resource Plan 2010, it had nuclear capacity of 9,600 megawatt, meaning that the government wanted to build nuclear plants to the capacity of 9,600 megawatt. But then it ended up being a political, story, more and less about technology as nuclear. We all know that, and we all agree in the world that nuclear can supply us with cheap, reliable, and clean electricity, as the world is moving towards clean energy technologies.
So, what's the fear?
We should be asking our politicians, who are they fearing? Why are they not doing the right thing? Because if you check other countries, such as US, they are loud. They are announcing that they are going to add 200 gigawatt, I think, 200 gigawatt of nuclear capacity. And US has more nuclear power plants than anyone in the world. But they still want to add more. But we have our government here with only 5% coming from nuclear. They are scared to implement nuclear, so I don't know who are they fearing.
So I want us to pack this nuclear a bit and talk about our stronghold, coal. And we've got around, I've always used this figure for many years without changing it, because if this mine closed and other ones, the Mpumalanga belt is about 40 coal mines. And we always take our coal outside the country. And I just want to know, Ramaphosa is pressured by Americans, of course the Europeans as well. They keep speaking about this green energy, and we must relinquish the fossil fuel because for the environment and I sit here, I'm like, why would we want our stronghold and to rely on something that is unreliable itself? Do you know anything about that space, and should we fear anything? Because it scares me.
Yes, number one, yes, South Africa is a coal country, as you say. We have a lot of coal. But then the pressure that comes from the global north, is really high, but it means nothing if our government is not succumbing to that pressure. But again, South Africa is sharing the globe with many other countries. We are not alone here. So if the globe is taking a different direction to say now we are moving away from these energy technologies that are emitting emissions, and we have to play our role. But now this is what we get wrong as South Africa, is that we want to be told what to do. And also we interpret these CO2 emissions and net zero carbon emissions incorrectly, because the goal really should be to curbing emissions. Whether you curb emissions still using coal and inventing in technologies such as clean coal, it really it shouldn't be a problem. No one should tell you to stop using coal, but someone should tell you use coal responsibly.
So in layman's terms, you're saying, because I'm trying as much as possible not to use too much jargon and technicalities. So if the complaints about coal is because we are emitting into these bad greenhouse gases and stuff, so we can invest while we are still producing we can invest in reduction of
emissions.
So
because even the countries that are encouraging us, because we can just say they are encouraging us because they are not forcing us. If I come here and say I'm giving you money to move these cameras to another direction, if you like money, you will move them. Is that not the case? So I think that's the situation here, that we get excited to get these loans, and we forget that really the agenda should be about curbing emissions, and also doing so responsibly, not in a manner that compromises our economy. But then that's not what's happening. So these countries who are not stopping to use their coal, they're coming to us and say, move away from coal. And we say, okay, it's fine, we'll move away from coal. If you check, especially there's a new document called, it's not even new, it was released last year, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. It doesn't have coal, it doesn't have nuclear. And I don't know why it doesn't have nuclear, because nuclear is one of the clean technologies that these countries who are offering us money to move away from coal, they are ready to implement nuclear programs. But then that money comes with those conditions that you only implement green technologies such as wind, solar, and they include battery energy storage in that implementation plan. So that's just the issue, to say South Africa is not resilient when it comes to what the global north is pushing us towards.
The politics of this is, people are saying Zuma has always said nuclear. And of course, people who are controversies will always advocate for good things that Jacob Zuma has done, and they will also highlight the failures of Ramaphosa, chief of which is this thread that I just asked you about, this coal thing. South Africa, we get things reported in the media, you think maybe it's a hoax, maybe it's you, and jiggy the way this is implemented, like the two-port system. So I'm just giving you an example of, sometimes you sit there, you're not sure what is happening. So Jacob Zuma pushes for nuclear, and he says the Russians will do it. What happened?
He was right, especially with the capacity that he suggested. Okay, it's not just him. Let's just call it that government at that time.
Like I said, I'm political, and I want the MK guys to say, no, this is theirs. Okay. Because whenever I come down against Zuma, they always say, I want it to be fair.
All right. Yeah. He was correct. He even had the right capacity, 9,600 megawatts. And by the way, we would have switched on the first maybe nuclear reactor last year, 2023, when the
that was the plan.
Yes, that was the plan. When the load shedding was high.
Yes.
So we would have solved at least the problem of load shedding. So he was correct. But then again, whether or he was correct in how he wanted to implement it. Remember now, this included some foreigners buying our uranium mines, so I'm not sure about that. But yeah, he was right.
And the figure of trillion, was it true?
The figure of trillion was not true. Definitely it wasn't true, because even if you look at the Zondo Commission report, there's no nuclear there, but they made noise to say nuclear was going to cost $1 trillion. But then again, even if nuclear was going to cost $1 trillion, we are talking about 9,600 megawatts. That's huge. That's like almost 10 stages of load shedding you solved right there. And imagine how much this country has lost during load shedding. Trillion.
Hold it there. I want us to put it into perspective. You said maybe the first one would have been commissioned and would be eating of the fruit.
Yes.
Plus minus how is it 9,000 that you're talking about?
No, not 9,000.
Yes.
And that's another thing that we need to understand. Zuma was not going to implement 9,600 megawatts
at once. Yes.
It has never happened anywhere in the world.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because
they were going to build the first reactor, the second one, third one, in the space of 10 years.
Yes.
That was the plan.
Yes.
So even if they were going to spend that 1 trillion,
yes,
they were going to spend it in a space of 10 years.
Yes.
So that was the plan.
Yeah, of which I agree, and sometimes I don't blame people who are afraid of the comrades. If you given our history with how we failed with the coal-fired power stations.
Sorry
yes.
to cut you off. And another thing, to say that Zuma wanted Russians to build, that is also not correct. What happened is that South Africa signed, memorandum of cooperations. They call them that, with U.S., Russia, South Korea, and France.
Okay.
It was France, and I think in U.S. it was 5 countries. So they signed the memorandum of cooperation with those countries. And then the decision to build had not been taken yet, because in order for you to take that decision, you have to do, to call for bidders to come. We call it request for proposals, to come in and build and tell you how much they're going to build this nuclear power plant, with how much it's going to cost for South Africa. And that step never happened. That's why even today we still don't know how much nuclear was going to cost then and how much it's going to cost now, because it will not happen until we go through that process of request for proposals. And that's the problem with anti-nuclear lobby groups such as the SAFSEI at Life Africa, because they are not allowing the process to unfold. They quickly stop the process before they are proven either correct or wrong to say nuclear is going to cost trillions.
So nuclear is something that we have the power to do, but we are failed by politicians. And now the ANC has failed us.
Because the plan that you have was not built by ANC. Maybe I should agree with you until ANC says we are building a nuclear, until we see a nuclear power plant being built, not them talking about it. Because I feel like when they talk about it, especially they spoke a lot about implementing nuclear before elections. Mm-hmm. Was that an election campaign?
Yeah, because
they're looking for votes. Because right now it's quiet, and we saw that Minister Ramaphosa withdrew the gazette for Section 34 determination, and that was like a couple of weeks ago. Meaning now we are back from scratch. Exactly what happened in 2017. Now we have to start from scratch, go through publishing the Section 34 determination, asking for NERSA to concur. We are back to square one.
So I'm talking diet now, our diet as South Africa in terms of energy, what we consume. The reason I wanted to talk about those nuclears and how many are going to be commissioned is, as we speak, what's our consumption rate as South Africa?
consumption rate.
Or reach how many megawatt per day? Is it even quantifiable?
What I can tell you is that the capacity, the ESCOM, the base
what they are
load,
producing.
Yes, what they have, the base load capacity that they have is around 40,000. Somewhere there between 40 and 50,000.
Okay.
Yes. And when we have load shedding, it means that they cannot give us that capacity.
Okay.
I mean, they can't even give us half of that if we go to stage 6 or stage 8, meaning that what they are producing is less than what they are supposed to be producing, which means 40,000. And they blame it on these power plants breaking up and, and not being maintained, and especially during Andre the Rater's time, the power plants were not being the coal plants were not being maintained properly.
The reason I want us to talk like the basics is, let's say on that 40, Quebec gives us 5%.
Yes, it gives us 2,000 megawatts, and it supplies Western Cape, half of Western Cape community with electricity, not the whole half.
And this green energy people, the alternatives,
yes.
How much is it in percentage?
We have around 6,500 megawatts independent power producers, wind and solar, concentrated solar power plants, signed with ESCOM, the contract with ESCOM. The total capacity is 6,500 megawatts. But when we had load shedding and when they were reporting ESCOM, people can go to ESCOM X account and check when we had load shedding, the reporting that was happening there. It said the demand is, let's say 30,000, and ESCOM can only give us maybe 20,000. But when they were reporting, when we were telling us how much these IPPs are giving us, these renewables, they're supposed to give us 6,500 megawatts. They're only giving us 1,400 megawatts, and I'm being generous.
And that is still better than one
of what they promised us.
Yes, and it's still better than half. They're not even doing better than Quebec. So, look, man, and like I told you before we start, I don't want us to get too technical that we lose our people because
megawatts,
yes, and percentages. I don't want us to go there. But these people are. Are you free to talk about who are these people?
Sure.
This alternative, yes.
No, people can Google. I think Patrice Motsipa is one of the independent power producers in South Africa. He has a company, a renewables company. What's it, Rainbow Energy, I think. He's one of them, but some of them, they come from overseas. They're not even local companies.
And they're... and
by the way, some of them, especially they call it bid window 1, 2, whatever, 5, 10, because the government department has to sign them, those IPPs, and approve them. And some of them were signed during your
had lockdown
during Zuma time.
Oh, so Zuma cannot claim innocence here.
But you know what he wanted? He wanted to play safe. To say, I'm giving you what you want, your renewables. Now allow me to do nuclear.
Yes.
That's not how the world operates.
Okay, so these nameless people, they just remind me of when that building in George fell. We just knew there are 5 companies, there are 10 companies, there are these companies, but the names are not forthcoming. So, as South Africa, in terms of nuclear. No, in fact, let's tackle this one first. I can remember like the fears of nuclear. Yeah, and how you store it and how you dispose of it and stuff. Because I want us to talk about that. Let's start with Nota. Nota says Kafasa Hartepies Port Dam, there's a nuclear reactor. Please tell us if it's true.
Navon, I have to thank him for initiating that conversation because now we are talking about it.
Yeah.
But Nota, my brother, you were wrong. Thank you for even mentioning the word nuclear because at least he knows something. He knows that near Hartepiers Port there is a nuclear facility.
Yeah.
Yes, he's correct in saying that. But he's wrong in saying that water is used to cool the radiation at the nuclear facility. Because no, you don't need that water.
Yes.
They used a different type of water, the cleanest water. They call it demineralized water.
Demineralized water.
To cool that reactor.
Okay.
Yes.
It's fine.
No, it doesn't come from the tap. It doesn't come from the dam, of course.
Let's talk about other fears. Chernobyl, like I said, ke poster boy of all things going wrong with nuclear.
Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Yeah.
Daiichi.
Japan. Yeah. Fukushima is quite recent, right?
It's in 2011.
Yeah, it's quite recent. So let's talk about, you'll get to it.
Yes.
Let's talk about Chernobyl, because in early history and, biologists have made studies, scientists have made studies there, there's vegetation growing there without problems and animals are in there without problems. So I'm talking about local. But about Peli Gatredville, by the way. But about Pelindava, fear or in Pelindava, that's where the nuclear facility is. If it explodes, or whatever problems happen there, or a Chernobyl happens in Pelindava, it will wipe all of us out until Mamelodi. I don't even know how to pose the question to you. How realistic is that?
Number one, a nuclear power plant does not explode.
Okay, Chef?
Explosion is when something like
go
boom.
Yes.
It never happens anywhere in the world. It doesn't explode, not even in Chernobyl.
Yeah.
It releases what we call radiation.
True.
Radiation you can smell, you can see, you can touch. It's something like that. So it releases radiation when an accident happens, like in Chernobyl. But we need to talk about what happened in Chernobyl. Which is, they were doing the emergency exercise, which was not approved, by the way. And the technology that was used then is an old technology which is not used now, or is not used currently. But it just people, the workers were exploring and doing that emergency exercise, and unfortunately it led to a nuclear power plant then. That nuclear power plant accident where I think around 64 people lost their lives, unfortunately. But that was then. And then in Fukushima, which is, you said, is recent.
Before you go further, generations, dreams died there in Chernobyl because everyone was evacuated.
Yeah, people get,
yes.
Let me say what happens when there's a nuclear accident. The law, by the way, the nuclear sector is guided by laws. It's highly regulated. There's a local regulator, the National Nuclear Regulator, NNR. There's also an international regulator, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. They regulate all nuclear plants in the world. Then there are plans in place. So let's say, for instance, in Pelindaba, they work. The municipality has to be involved, the Tshwane municipality, the Madibeng municipality, the government as a whole. They have a evacuation plan in place to say, in case of an accident, this is what needs to happen. Together with these municipalities and the national government, this is what is going to do, this is how we're going to evacuate people. So there is that plan in place. So no one will be wiped off. And fortunately for almost 60 years that has not happened, meaning that South Africa is very good in handling their nuclear power plants. By the way, there's about 140 something nuclear reactors in the world, and the accident has only been in 2 nuclear power plants.
Yeah, hold it before we go to Fukushima. So, by the way, just allay our fears. So that painstaking reorganization of the risk analysis and what would happen if it doesn't only happen there, even in mines and coal plants. It happens whenever there's industrial activity happening. So it's
even there were floods. Go KZN,
yes.
Go Eastern Cape. Same thing. They have that evacuation plan in
yes.
place. Every municipality.
Yes. Okay. Just so people don't think, it means it's dangerous.
No.
Okay.
The government has to have those plans.
Yeah. All right, sharp. Let's go to Fukushima, and so we could also allay fears. What had happened? So was Fukushima carrying ethnic activity?
Fukushima, what happened? Mainly a tsunami.
Yeah.
Yes, so it was a natural disaster. And then that tsunami wave affected a nuclear power plant. It hit a nuclear power plant. But actually, the Fukushima is a good example of how safe nuclear power plants are. Because what happened to Fukushima when that tsunami wave hit the nuclear power plant, it automatically shut itself down. And then later on, because there were some technical issues, then it started releasing radiation. Then they quickly evacuated people to Fukushima. But the incident is not a nuclear incident. It was a natural disaster which killed thousands and thousands of people, that tsunami wave.
So,
in Fukushima, no one died.
Yeah. So, in the perspective that you have drawn, the amount, the plants all over the world, and only 2 in recorded history, of course, Chernobyl being the biggest and Fukushima being the latest. By rates of percentages, this thing is more safer than a lot of things.
More safer than many things.
Yes.
I have to say it, guys. Safer than coal, safer than renewable. Wind and sun.
Okay, so I as a South African, you know, like I told you, I went there, and when you get there, you sit and you think, guys, what's wrong with our country? We can do a train, by the way, in South Africa. We can build a train, and we can build a fighter jet. I mean, a fighter helicopter, an assault one by that way. But why can't we do this thing that people, because it's no longer fear. The technology is proven that it's safe. The expertise is there, as you say. Is it a case of, and I'm going to use comrades, and I always want to blame comrades because I cannot blame the people that we do not see. The comrades do not want to do something that are not going to benefit directly. Is that fierce? Is that narrative sustainable?
Maybe. Maybe. You know, someone called me, a colleague of mine.
Yes.
I'm not going to say his name. He
Yes.
was telling me exactly that, to say, you know, he was speaking to someone who once worked at the government department.
Yeah.
Told him that, you know, this nuclear might never happen because whenever the country starts, you know, preparing for it, then the government changes. So I think we should blame on the change of government, because they change while we are still busy, and whoever comes, then they come with new ideas and all these things. Now want to start from scratch and do it their own way. So the problem is politics when it comes to nuclear, because it's too attached to politicians. Without them, it cannot be implemented.
Am I fair to use old these jargons? Old energy and new energy. So my old will be like your nucleus and the coals, and you have said we are good with those. Are those old energies?
Yes.
Okay, then.
And it's something that has been tested.
Yes.
Everywhere, and it works.
And we are good at it.
And we are good at it, and we are sure that it works. By the way, we have to be honest and say renewables, wind, solar, they have a space in the energy mix. We are not saying we do not want them. We are saying they have a space, but renewables alone will not improve or even sustain our economy. No country in the world has ever been sustained by wind, solar and battery energy storage. Its economy has ever been sustained by those technologies.
So the new energies will be this, and I'm sorry to use this word because
they're not new. I don't know why people are saying renewables are new. You remember when we used batteries to watch TV? You said it's the same thing. You remember when the battery is now?
Yes.
We used to open the sun.
Yes. The PM9s and the PM10s.
Now because of PR, these technologies are now
deemed new.
New technology.
Yeah.
They are not new, and we are not even renewable. But yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a photographer, ne?
Yes.
So I love rechargeable batteries and stuff, and I rely on them. So I would tell people that, well, I battle with the word green technology. I battle with the word green energy, and for various reasons. And sometimes because I'm not an engineer, and maybe I become too analytical. So there's this word they talk about, green hydrogen, because hydrogen it comes naturally, maybe like your uranium and stuff comes naturally, but to take it, to separate it, the industrial process of getting it to be green, you have to damage the earth. So it's oxymorons for me.
Green hydrogen is not an energy source. You still need energy sources to produce green hydrogen.
Yes.
And the world, by the way, I have to tell you, in other countries, they are talking about using small modular reactors, nuclear, to produce green hydrogen. I think that's when it can become green. Not now, when we are still using
fuel. Yes, if you're using fossil fuel to create it, then it's how do you use coal? Yes,
it's like the same thing as wind turbines and solar panels.
Yeah.
You cannot
produce
manufacture those things.
The high energy needed there. So that's why I'm saying I'm battling with this thing, and engineers are afraid to come and sit where you are sitting, because this is their space.
This is their space. But now here, I'm glad you are taking me there, because people say, why should we listen to a communicate? At least I speak about all sectors. Engineers are specific.
Yes.
You see, if you work with this machine, all you know is this machine, and somebody will ask you about Zuma technology. You see now, this is not a conversation for engineers.
Yes.
They only know what they are doing. Even when they're producing, let's say, maybe nuclear medicine, a person who works in the hot cell, they only know what's happening in the hot cell. They can't talk about something else, about the research reactor that was built in 1965. They're not interested in those things. These are nerds.
Yes. And by the way,
to come and talk to you,
they are afraid. They are afraid. Just prove me wrong if there are engineers who can come and talk about this and many others. I mean, I know engineers who are involved in wind turbines. Yeah. I know engineers who've worked in what is this? Hydrogen, energy saving. I almost talk about that organization that I don't want to talk about, where they re-energize the grid using something else. But all I'm just saying is, engineers are normally afraid to go out and speak.
Because they're not talkers, they engineers. They engineers. Like if you go to a doctor, do you know, I always say in this nuclear industry, if doctors were able to speak to their
to their patients,
would be demystified. Because they would be telling you, now I'm injecting you with nuclear medicine. Now when I put you inside the scanner, this is nuclear.
Let's talk about isotopes, please. Can we?
No. See, if doctors were talking, but a doctor would, when a doctor is treating you, they're quiet. They're just wearing their mask and their protective equipment. And they're not talking to you. So you expect engineers to come and start addressing politics. They don't know.
Ish. Yeah, no, it's very difficult. So I speak with my younger brother.
The doctor who's using a nuclear medicine, they probably don't even know it comes from South Africa.
Yes.
They just use it and that's it.
Yeah.
They don't care where it comes from.
I've got a younger brother who's in that space, and I know he's gonna give comment on this podcast, and I always want him to put it easy for me, but it's very complicated just for an ordinary man to see. He's a pharmacist. So for someone who does not know all these alternatives and how is it that we can do, are we ever going? I remember Julius Malema spoke about, and allow me to go there, in 2 weeks' time the whole entire thing is going to shut down. So he obviously spoke to some. He was saying, and he got us into a frenzy and stuff. Of course, it didn't happen. And to be honest, I know Julius Malema would have files that he would have gotten from high and reliable sources. But at the time, I was like, this is unlikely. I mean, those things don't even happen in countries that are not stable. It's unlikely to happen. But if it does happen, it's sabotage, and an industrial espionage of international scale. And I got worried because Julius Malema believed it could be true. And I sat there and thinking, no, man. And of course, it didn't happen. What is the likelihood of someone saying you have failed with these alternative energies? Because for me, they are just supplements. They could not do this. That our coal will get to a point, because it won't be depleted. Someone says, stop coal now. Rely on these ones that we have already proven that are unreliable. What is the likelihood of doing that? Because if it's not going to happen, when a princess, why should we worry?
Well, okay, now I have to say that the likelihood of the world, that not even South Africa,
yes,
the world stop using coal.
Yes, very minimal.
Very minimal. But here's what has happened, especially with the European countries. They have, initiated these carbon taxes to say we are going to tax a country that emits. So that's the reason now we're going to pay more for using coal. But this is, emitting really when we have coal mines and they need our coal. They still need to buy it.
Yes.
So we're not going to stop, but it's going to become very costly.
And we'll get to a place where, because this is what worries me, are we ever going to get to a place where we are then forced at gunpoint to...
No one. We are a sovereign country. We can't be we can't. The worst that can happen is us being sanctioned. But then, sanctioned by who? People who are also using coal. Because they're also using coal. If you look at China is building more coal power plants. They can afford to. They have money.
Mm-hmm.
And if China stops, using coal, how are they going to manufacture? Everything comes from China. Even Americans can't even, they don't want to assemble their iPhones. They send them to China. You need energy to do all those things. That's why everything comes from China. They have energy. And they're building more coal plants. They're building more nuclear power plants than anyone else right now.
Something we could have done had we went nuclear way.
Went nuclear way. But going nuclear way doesn't mean South Africa must stop using their coal. And people usually say these technologies, the green technologies, sun, wind, they are God-given. Who gave us coal? Satan? Minerals.
Yes.
Who gave us uranium?
Yeah. So I get to the point where I want to close the podcast, but I want to give you a chance to, of course, tell us the thing that you wanted to come to the podcast and share with people that you think are not well discussed in the outside world. Anything in terms of...
Yes, maybe let's start by saying electricity is becoming costly. We know that Eskom applied to the regulator NERSA for electricity tariffs to be increased again to them, I think, up to 40%.
Ish.
It's already expensive. We can't afford it right now. And South Africa, if we do not get involved in these discussions, especially that affect us, our economy, because our economy is affected by these big projects or by energy. So if we don't get involved by taking the responsibility of holding our government accountable for implementing things that they promised us. They promised us nuclear before elections. Now there's no nuclear. We know that Minister said he'll start with the plan, restart the plans soon. But then, as South Africans, let's come and say and put pressure on our government to implement these things, because there will be a time where electricity becomes more costly, and nuclear will give us the cheapest electricity. It's currently doing that now. By Eskom's own admission, you can go check their financials. Koberg offers Eskom the cheapest electricity per kilowatt, and do you know why? Because Koberg is a paid-off asset in South Africa. It's a valuable asset for the country. And that's one of the advantages of nuclear. You can operate a nuclear power plant for 60 to 80 years, given that it's still working. Meaning that if after you paid let's say after 20 years, then you have a valuable asset that you can make profit on. So we need these nuclear power plants. When the first and second industrialization happened, industrial revolution happened, the countries such as or the states or the continents such as Europe, America, and others, they built not only coal plants, but they also built nuclear plants. Meaning they did not put their eggs in one basket, because they knew it would come to a time where they decide that the world is moving away from coal. Now that the decision or the time has come, where are we as South Africa? Because we put our eggs in one basket and did not diversify our energy sector. It's not diversified. Now we are facing a problem where it's either you do renewables or, but definitely move away from coal. Had we built more nuclear power plants, right now at least we would know that at least we can be able to experiment with these renewables, because for me it's still an experiment, because as I said earlier on, no country has ever developed using those technologies. So we still need them in the energy mix so that we are able to diversify our energy. But now we're in a situation, the world is moving away from coal. We don't want to move away from coal, but that does not mean we cannot start thinking about ways in which we can diversify our energy. And that's where nuclear comes in, because nuclear can give us the reliable electricity, reliable that you can get 24/7. It does not depend on weather conditions. You can get it at any time. We mine uranium, we get nuclear. The capacity factor of nuclear is even higher than coal, because that's how reliable nuclear is. It gives us the clean technology that these countries are demanding that the world move towards. So I want South Africa to say, when you start speaking about other things that this government is not doing, also scream that they must do nuclear, because nuclear is not only going to benefit government, it's going to benefit us, ordinary citizens. It's going to help us reduce our electricity costs. So that's what I wanted to talk to South Africans about.
Your organization, do you go to schools? Do you prepare in allowing kids to know what is that you guys do, and maybe opt to be nuclear practitioners in future?
Yes, definitely. Recently I've been so busy. Number one, I've traveled to 23 countries speaking about this subject, and also visiting other nuclear plants in other countries, and also learning about their energy policies.
Yes.
In these countries. Yes, I do go to school. Recently I was in Rustenburg, Mafikeng, to do a career talk about the careers that are available in the nuclear industry. And I do go to schools. I do go to political gatherings.
Yes.
Nuclear, so
sure.
Find me everywhere.
Yes.
And people start associating me with a specific political party.
Yes.
I'm a nuclear person, guys. I want nuclear. Where nuclear is discussed, you will find me. Whether nuclear is being discussed by EFF, DA, because we have to influence policies. How else are you going to influence policies if you do not enter these political spaces? So you find me there. And also I recently I was in KZN. I was invited by the MEC for Transport and Human Settlement, to speak about nuclear at the Women in Construction event.
Great.
When you speak construction, you can also talk about nuclear.
Great. For parents who are watching, because it's unlikely that kids would be watching, for parents who are watching and they would want their kids to go into this space because it's a futuristic thing. We have it now and it might be bigger in the future if we get political will. What should their kids study towards, and what should they empower themselves with, and where are they going to study something nuclear related?
Well, in the nuclear organization, you find all these
trades.
Is all these background experiences. But for specific nuclear-related qualifications, they have to study number one, maths and science. And they can do their first degree, either chemistry but it has to have maths and science. And then they can do maybe a postgraduate of nuclear science, nuclear physics, nuclear
pharmacy.
No, nuclear physics course. When you can do that, the pharmacy degree, but then you now need to be specific, because you need to be a specialist. Then to become a specialist, that's when now you say, I'm moving towards being a nuclear engineer. Yes, I have an engineering degree, but now I want to be a nuclear engineer. Then I'm going to do a postgraduate in nuclear engineering. You can find it in nuclear science and engineering. You can find it in, I think, Northwest University, Potchefstroom, and University of Cape Town. They can just search. But you do maths and science. And then, in the nuclear industry, you have more artisans than nuclear engineers and scientists. So people must never undermine these artisans' qualifications. They're very important. We have more artisans than we have technicians as well. They get told to, trained to be technicians. We also have what you call the radiation protection officers, RPOs. You find them even in mines. And for medicine, to become a radiologist, Dr. Musa Mtombini, last year he announced that he's qualified as a radiologist. That's a nuclear doctor. Yes, you can also study those qualifications.
Mam Tombini, thank you very much.
And when nuclear start building, by the way, then it's gonna have things are gonna happen for people for this country, because that's a mega project.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Machine politically incorrect, let's end it there. Too much engineering English for us to consume at the same time. Thank you.